Cloud, and we're doing a live transcription now.
Nice
And
catch, Jack.
so the hearing presentation or the Word FinCom statement, would you like to see up on the screen?
Why don't we start with the Stephanie's document?
Is that clear for everyone?
It is. So we'll just open this up for, and I mean, it's a living, breathing document. We can make and change it as we see fit. We can make additions and subtractions. So I'd like to just open it up to anybody on the committee. I hope everyone had a chance to read it to some degree. And if anybody has any thoughts or comments about it, now is the time to raise those.
So I read this. Oh, sorry, Steph.
I was just gonna say, I'll just flag before we get too deep into it that Ed had mentioned that I incorrectly said AA when it's AA plus bond rating.
That's a big one.
Good point.
Sorry,
As
Jack,
in
go
rating
ahead.
agency.
Steph, I thought you did a really good job with this, but in the second paragraph, just stylistically, like I wasn't quite sure what you were trying. Well, I knew what you were trying to say, but like I feel like we're missing a sentence or like a transition in the middle of it. Just because it goes from town rating continues highest level despite challenges. And then like all of a sudden we're just talking about the number of students. So I just think we need a transition right there just so that people understand that you're talking about challenges, because the first time I read it, I got a little confused. But that besides that, like I thought this was really good and you did a great job putting it together.
Do we, Pat, do you think you could make, give Stephanie the ability to share and she could share the document and then possibly we could.
She's not a good sharer, but I will do that.
Oh, man. Yeah. If you make it, I have it already open in my Google Docs, so I can do that too.
It just makes sense. I'd like to get this reviewed and kind of get a consensus. I mean, this isn't a vote item. This is just kind of I'd like to have everyone's opinion item.
Go ahead, Steph. It's all yours.
All right, cool. Okay, can y'all see?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, so I agree, Sarah. I was taking some of Ed's really great bullets that he had put together and trying to kind of weave them in here somewhere. So I think he had a sentence that was something along the lines of there's an override and it's in part driven by enrollment figures, and he had a lot more granular detail that I didn't necessarily feel like we need to get into, but that's kind of what I was going for here. So any suggestions just in terms of what a transitory sentence could be here?
So it looks like, okay, so the first sentence, town's financial management rating continues highest levels, very strong given only top 15%. Despite challenges presented by, so it's supposed to, I think you're transitioning into reasons for the override. So like increased challenges, because I don't even think that that's considered to be a challenge. It's just like increased expenses include, or like budget increases, something like really simple like that. Just like budget, I mean, the changes to the budget include, I mean, the reasons for the changes to the budget include changes in the number of students in our regional school, something like that. And then you can even get rid of and then you can change that sentence to say something along the lines of which has led to budget overrides for these costs. So it's something really simple.
All right, I'm sorry, I was correct. Yeah. So say that one more time.
So hold on. This is where the live transcript comes in handy, right? So, the reasons for the increases in the budget include items such as
So they're gonna
changes
have
to
more
changes
stuff.
in the number of students attending our regional schools. And then I would just add after schools a comma, and then which has led to budget overrides for these costs. Something along those lines, like, and if you want to throw in any other like big flag changes in the budget, that would be the place to do it. But I think that's the biggest one.
I think we have to, because you
Yeah.
were alluding to a.
Yeah, I alluded to more of them, so.
Let me just suggest something also to modify changes in the beginning of that sentence. These are really unanticipated or, unplanned, or just to indicate that they were surprises. Unforeseen, whichever, floats your boat. And I want to come back to something also. Since you said, Stephanie, you took a bunch of bullet points from Ed, I'm assuming this is correct, but it seems to me in his previous presentations, he said that AA plus was in the top, whatever, of statewide. So was it statewide or national? That I'm sure you just picked that right off. Whatever.
Yeah, I copy pasted, so I defer to Ed. Is he on the call?
Okay, so I'm assuming that that's correct.
National.
Okay.
Good for us.
Nice job, Yarmouth.
All right, so unforeseen reasons for the increases in the budget include items such as changes in the number of students attending our regional schools, which has led to a budget override for these costs. The Finance Committee and Capital Budget Committees, Boards of Selectmen and Town have worked hard to revise the town budget to keep the override as low as possible.
So it'd be nice to have, if we could think of one other item to add into that to.
And can I say that you said schools, does that mean it reflects on Cape Tech as well?
Well, the gist of the bullet the fact of the matter is that our numbers went down for Cape Tech. But
It was an increase. This year, there was a major increase in Yarmouth students attending Cape Tech.
I thought
Yeah.
that there was an increase in one and a decrease in another, as I recalled it, but it just, with all that detail, it just,
There was an increase in the voc tech and decrease in the school in Dennis Yarmouth.
Dennis students, which gave us a higher percentage. I'm reading the bullet points that Ed presented for you.
yeah, but in one case, like our number of students went down less dramatically than Dennis's did. And that just seems very complex to add for something that's kind of a high level view. So that's why I was saying like changes.
Got
enrollment, because we're going to let, the school committee is going to make their pitch, But if you want me to copy paste the information from Ed's bullet, I can.
I think this is
Well,
this is fine.
Oh, sorry, Brian. Maybe we avoid that whole like conversation, just say increases in budget include items such as increased school costs, which has led to an override for those costs. Because
Right.
that's really what the override is about, is school.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to kind of say that we've got a budget override. It's related to the school and changes in the schools and the number of students attending the schools. And we've tried to adjust the town budget down as much as possible so that, what the taxpayers have to face is as minimal as possible. So what's another way to write that then?
I don't think it's bad the way it is.
Because now that you've explained it to me, I understand your point that you meant like by schools, you're incorporating all schools. But I'm not sure if another person would read it that way, but I'm also being lawyer nitpicky at you right now. So I'm not sure if anyone else will get that level of like nitpicky.
Well, I'm sure there'll be a few members at that meeting.
There's a couple other lawyers in Yarmouth, yes.
Well, to take the lawyers off the hook, let me be the always obnoxious editor. if a student had used force multiplier, I would have been all over them. That is so jargony. But although I will admit, I couldn't myself come up with a more precise way to describe what we're talking about.
Well, that's another
Leverage.
paragraph down, George. Yeah,
I don't think this has to be, a Charles Dickens novel. I've read prior ones and, this is okay. It's fine.
we could just merge this sentence and say, despite the challenges presented by the pandemic, including changes in the number of students attending our regional schools, which has led to a budget override for those costs. How does that sound?
Yeah, I think that's cleaner.
Okay. Great. All right, so George had the force
No, I have no
multiplier.
better offer, so I was just trying to deflect the attention on poor lawyers, Word craft is a difficult task. I do have one other though, and it's in the next paragraph down. In front of Department of Transportation, I think just as for the average reader, they may confuse that with our own town highway department. So why don't we just say Massachusetts Department of Transportation?
Mhm.
So it's clear.
Yep.
Okay.
Robert has his hand raised, Mr. Chairman.
Robert does, Robert.
I do. Paragraph, the town has had to reduce capital spending. I was wondering if we could actually add, it's more along of substantially reduced capital spending. It is not used to preserve town facilities to balance the last two budget cycles. Maybe not balance. I guess I get what you're trying to say by manage because it's not all we did. But I think we just cut $500,000 of A1 and A2 requests out of the capital budget. I think that's a pretty good sized number.
So I'm sorry, you're saying, so the town has substantially reduced capital spending to do what?
Used to for the town facilities because it says two. The way it was worded was a little weird to me. I
Just to
thought.
preserve. So instead of preserve, what would we say? To just give me a verb.
No, used to preserve.
Oh, okay. Yeah. all
Okay,
right.
yeah. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Used to preserve.
Town facilities.
Yep.
I'm just telling them that's what we usually use that money for. And I just thought it was a little weird without the word used in there, but
Yep.
and I think that was it. Other than just substantial, I think the rest was great.
Okay. Any other changes? I'm gonna make that plus.
Put that plus in there.
It's a big step, Means a lot.
It does, actually.
I agree.
Probably 1.5 on borrowing.
Sorry, I have a very needy cat right now. It's like, let me up. All right. Any other changes? No.
All right.
Cool.
That's what we're going with.
I'm sending that to you, Pat.
Got it.
Pat, can you then send that to the rest of the committee, the final?
Sure.
All right, so let's jump over to the presentation. Oh, you're already there. Great. Is this the one with notes? Can we get the one up with did I send you one that also has the notes on it?
I don't believe so. This is the one I had.
All right.
You have one with notes. Would you like to share?
I don't know how to do that, Pat.
Oh, it's not hard.
I'll just send it to you.
Oh, okay.
I can't actually. I'm sorry. Hold on.
I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to minimize off the freeze. And I'm going to take that out, cancel that, and view the speaker gallery. Over to
All right. You should have it. All Perhaps it'll take a few seconds to get there for you. I think I did send the one with the notes to everybody else though, correct?
Ooh, we'll see in a minute.
I mean, I have it and I can share my screen again. If you want. I
That
have
was,
it open, I have it
you
open
have-
in Google Docs.
you have it? Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Yep, because this has got, you can see
Yeah,
the notes
there we
here.
go.
All right.
Thank you. So, first slide's obviously pretty self-explanatory. Just kind of the 4 bullet points that we're trying to make. And again, this is open for discussion, so we can get any kind of feedback. That would be great. So if we just go to the second page. And this is where the notes, although I'm not sure if we're missing notes. Oh yeah, okay, there we go. Oh, that works. If anybody wants to read that to themselves and make any suggestions or changes if you see fit. It again is fairly self-explanatory. Steph, can you move that? Can you make that bigger? You make that screen.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to make this smaller.
Yeah, that's fine. All right, now we've got everything in there.
Yeah.
So we just started with the town budget's Proposition 2.5 override, or the fact that the town budget came in under the 2.5. We needed an override for the schools. And that's the 420,034, which the selectmen decided to go with. Not exactly what we thought, but we'll support it. The third bullet point about minimizing tax rate. So the Board of Selectmen, actually, let me just read through this. This is brand new, folks, so bear with me. So these are some of the bullet points below, and this was kind of one of those things where DY is paying that the $700,000 is the short-term borrowing cost for the new middle school, but it's really just a one-time kind of, I think they view it as a gift to the town of Yarmouth. They're using that from the E&D that they have war chest on. So that's helped with our cost. And they also paid for some of the capital needs from the E&D as well. Anybody have any questions on that? I mean, this is just kind of things that I'm gonna present to the board and read out. I mean, it's not too in-depth of information. And
Ryan, just a couple of quick points. If the notes go up on the screen, I think there's a typo in the first note.
they will not go up on the screen, by the way, but there is a typo, right?
And I just want to clarify that at the end of the day, the school threatened to use E&D to make up those capital items, which include the new boilers and the controls. But ultimately, I think they voted to use funds available in their FY21 budget.
Okay,
So they didn't really, they're not going to E&D for that one.
so let's see, paying for the short-term debt. So they're paying for the short-term debt with the E&D.
Correct. And the two capital items they paid for in available funds in FY21.
Okay. Steph, could you doctor that up at all?
So I'm saying schools paid for their capital ask.
From their 2021 budget, is that what you said, Bob?
Correct.
How's that?
Yeah, which freed up money for a small amount of town capital with a large amount. Can you just put a period after town capital and get rid of that with a large? That doesn't make sense.
Capitals. It's
Yeah, and-
capital large C. Steph as well, is that capital large C? Yeah,
I don't know.
should be.
Nobody else is seeing it besides Brian.
Yeah, I mean, none of this notes will be, this is just for me.
All right.
The rest of it, I'm not gonna show them what's behind the scene, it's like the Wizard of Oz. And the last sentence is just, we worked really hard, both our committee and CBC, trying to get all this done on short notice under, stress. So I don't think we need to add anything there. So does anybody have any further thoughts on that? Okay,
Brian, on the voc tech, the higher percentage increase, that was because we had more students going this year. The third paragraph,
correct. Yep, right.
okay?
Yeah, you can throw that. Perfect. Let's put that in there.
Yeah,
And that's something we're thrilled about as a town. I mean, we
are, actually, because they'll have a job when you get out of school.
that's right. They'll actually have jobs.
Yeah,
It's a wonderful thing. Okay, so let's move on to slide 3. So this is, obviously the elephant in the room is the wastewater, which has apparently been moved to the fall town meeting. Am I correct with that, Bob and Bob?
Yes, although the article remains
Okay,
with a request to indefinitely postpone so that, members of the board or maybe the finance committee, I don't think it's been worked out, can make a statement as to the town's support for the project.
okay.
Is there an intention, Bob, for the selectmen to do that?
Yes.
We need to talk to them more about it, but I think that's the
Yeah.
thrust.
Would they want or appreciate the finance committee doing the same?
Yeah, I think we should ask them when we meet with them.
At the,
I would think so.
at the Water Resources Committee meeting on Monday, it was emphasized that you supported it. And I think I represented that you hadn't, because I hadn't watched all the way to that part of the recording. Because your support came at the very end of the meeting.
Right.
Yeah, I had to represent the finance committee, George. I mean, what gives?
Thank you for that. Well, so back to kind of the bullet points here. We support wastewater, grow rather than cut way out of the problems, and then regrow commercial tax base. I know, Robert, you would really appreciate that one. So the notion here is, if we're going to add things back into the levy, we can either reduce expenses or increase revenues. I mean, it's as cut and dry as that. There's really no other way to do it. And some of this information Ed helped us with is that the analysis of the 10-year non-salary expenses results showed very small increases in expenses. And we've talked about this a couple different times, when we were looking at the budget and how to get it to the point where we wanted it. We couldn't cut expenses because they were so lean to begin with, and it wouldn't have a major impact. And then if we're going to look at cutting salaries and salary dollars, or perhaps programs, that's obviously something not that the town would that would be the last resort as well. And then I think at just a point of, in Great Recession, we cut 20% of the staff. And one of the ways that we cut programs was we turned over one of our 3 libraries to the nonprofits. Neither of those are ideal situations going forward. So if we want to start adding things in the levy, we need to grow our revenues. It's not advisable or something we would entertain or want to do to be cutting expenses or salaries. This brings us to, the big issue here is that in 2011, this wastewater project was 55 million. It's now 146. That's $9 million of growth per year over the last 10 or so years. That is a ridiculous number that we can't continue to do. And I even think by postponing this vote until the fall meeting, that's another, let's call it half a year. It's really not, but it will be, or actually it is. You know, that's $4.5 million of added cost if you're using the same multiplier. There you go, George, multiplier. That
Not forced, though.
it's not forced, no, but it's $4.5 million addition just by putting this off an additional 6 months starting point, or the vote point, and then going forward. So it's something we need to do. And we're just kind of thinking of, you know, what putting in sewage, what does it do for our commercial base? And we came up with an example of, you know, older motels, they're unattractive. You know, no one really wants to stay in them. I mean, we've all driven down 28 and seen what some of these dilapidated hotels look like. How much better, and what would be the occupancy rates if we had much nicer hotels, if we had sewerage and we were able to build these hotels like the Hampton Inns, which is a gorgeous hotel, which will never be replicated in the town unless we have sewer. So we have higher occupancy rates, which is higher taxes for a motel and hotel. We have higher meals taxes. We have higher property taxes, because if you knock down an old dilapidated hotel and build a brand new one, it's certainly going to be a higher tax base. And this is kind of a kind of just a point of clarification about what's happened to the commercial real estate market and tax base. It was 15% in 2002, and it's now less than 10% in 2021. You know, so it's a 5+% decrease versus residential over the last 18 or so years. And it's certainly not going to turn around anytime soon unless we do something about it. So those are the reasons and why we need to have wastewater.
Brian, can I make one suggestion?
Yes, please do.
Second bullet point, grow revenue rather than cut your way out of the problems.
Perfect. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
So do you feel as a committee that these 3 points with regards to wastewater and my talking points that I'm going to present to the Board of Selectmen, do we need to add anything to that? Do we want to add any more bullet points? Do we want to add any talking points?
Ryan, I have a question for you.
Yes, please.
Do you think it would be helpful at all to reference some of the empirical work that's been done on the impacts of the, you know, wastewater in terms of increasing the tax base, like the throwing a quote or something from the Donahue study?
Sure, I'm unfamiliar with that study.
Oh,
Give us a little context of what you mean.
let me send it over to you. I'll read something. I'm just looking. I happen to be looking at it because I picked up a copy of it today. I'm trying to, you know, study up on the project, and wastewater infrastructures may introduce numerous benefits to Yarmouth. Identified prospective projects in Yarmouth could bring hundreds of millions of dollars in new investment to the town, adding significantly to the tax base. Conservatively, if these projects added $100 million in assessed value to the town, then that could generate over $1 million per year to Yarmouth's revenues, providing a means to defray water infrastructure costs and add to public services. That's just a bullet point from a study that was done. Let me see what the date on that is.
Yeah, it's kind of a little dated now, I think.
It is dated, yeah.
Well, I mean, if it's dated, it could even be.
Well,
It could even be
That's
better.
not,
2018.
thing. It's just empirically demonstrating the point.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there's an Economic and Public Policy Research Institute that has performed that study for you and has told you that by increasing the wastewater, you have a chance of growing your way. It sort of makes your point for you. If you want, I could shoot you over this email that I have right here, and that you maybe you guys can
Yeah, I just threw in there what I thought you were trying to get at, which tell me if I got it, any of it inaccurately. According to the Donahue Institute report, which the selectmen would be familiar with, we could generate over $100 million a year with appropriate wastewater infrastructure. Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Should I say in new revenue?
Of new well, I don't think it's $100 million of new revenue, is it?
No, it's 100 million in property value.
Property value with $1 million in new revenue.
Right.
Yeah, Bob, that's a great point. Thank you.
I'm sorry, $100 million a year in property value with $1 million. Finish that sentence for me.
In new revenue.
And it's not $100 million a year, it's just $100 million in property value that would then generate $1 million per year of revenue.
Yeah.
Yep, that's good.
The other thing that I thought on here is just in the first paragraph that you got, and maybe one of the Roberts can help us with this, or Ed, but just the way we're framing it is kind of like, we haven't had any real kind of increases or whatever in the town, but basically like, I don't know if this kind of captures the fact that we just have fixed costs that continue to go up that are outside of our ability to control, such as healthcare. And so that's going to represent potentially an ever shrinking pie. So I don't know if there's a way to phrase that, but I thought that was another piece to kind of add to it.
Any thought on that?
Or not.
Well, let's.
I want to make sure I understand. Stephanie's point is that we have X number of expenses that we're going to have to incur that are always growing. Be nice if we had a always growing revenue source to offset that. Is that the point?
Yeah, just that even if the town doesn't add any new staff, costs continue to increase because of things that are outside of our control, such as healthcare costs.
Right.
And so that means that if you don't grow the size of the pie correspondingly, then you have to cut. You have to find ways to cut. And so you're not going to have the same dollar for dollar value over time as a result.
Pieces of the pie get smaller and smaller because you need
Exactly.
stuff. Right. So I mean, that's obvious. Right. There are costs associated with every town, business, everything that are out of our control that increase greater than, let's say, 2.5%. So we need to come up with other revenue sources or increase our revenue source base.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a simpler way of saying that, though.
Certainly not the way I just said it.
Or the way I said it.
Well, there you go.
I don't know if either Ed or either the Bobs have any suggestions.
Well, you're really talking about the fixed costs that accrue to the town. So, how would you phrase that?
Well, I think it'd be with an fixed cost above and beyond the typical inflation numbers that we're used to. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Fixed costs. Without increasing revenue. Oh, yeah. Without
But then,
cut rather, yeah,
I mean, that's what faces every business in America.
right.
what's the word I want to say? Not grow, but continue to maintain the same level of services.
Maintain, yeah, the same
Yeah.
level. That
I
makes
would
sense.
even put that same level of town service.
Well, in some sense here, we're confusing, the absolute dollar amount and the per person dollar amount. We want to stabilize the per person dollar amount, recognizing that population will grow, expenses will grow, revenues will grow, costs will grow. But we'd like to keep the per person expense, or maybe the per person revenue, the same.
Does that sound right then?
I think that's pretty good.
Okay. The other thing that just occurs, oh, I'm sorry, Robert's got his hand raised.
Robert?
Don't worry about it, you covered it.
Okay, thank you.
So the other piece that I think is important here when we're talking about wastewater is two things. One is the cost of sort of doing nothing in terms of the Conservation Law Foundation. Potentially, you know, they've been saber rattling for years. Their patience is going to wear out at some point. And, you know, the more proactive approach that we show as a town, not only does it position us to have it cost less in terms of, you know, the escalating cost of construction around it, but it also shows good faith effort so that, you know, should CLF decide to actually sue, you know, we are, you know, are showing some degree of good faith effort that would potentially help insulate us. The other piece is that as we go into a potential infrastructure, federal infrastructure bill coming out of Congress, we want to have things as shovel ready as possible. And so in order to be able to capture grant dollars. And so it is in every conceivable way in our best interest fiscally to take action as soon as possible. Robert, you're on mute. Bob. Still on mute.
Yeah, I was just nodding that that's a great point because there will be money coming in. And that's why I think Jeff is continuing to work with the engineer with the $6 million that was appropriated last year in order to be ready to put the pipe in the ground on Route 28 in concert with MassDOT. Shovel ready, as you said, Stephanie, and go further.
So I think we could put a little bit in there. I just don't want to get too in depth.
All right, we don't need to. I just think those are important points for everybody to be aware of.
I think they're actually very, so if we want to add something, I just don't want to get stuck in a situation where I can't fully answer. You know, we can throw out some certain information, but I also want to be able to be slightly versed in it. Right, that would be a great ending sentence right there.
So quick, yeah. That makes sense.
That's perfect. And it's not wastewater, not only.
Yeah.
You'll get that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Great. Do we have any other thoughts on these bullet points? I think we've kind of done a good job there. All right, let's move on to the next slide. All right. So this is a kind of a goal of the Board of Selectmen, is to get the roads and the $1.5 million capital back into the tax levy, which we took out for fiscal year 2021, right? Yes. So it kind of piggybacks on a lot of what we just talked about in the prior slide of just regrowing the tax base to, you know, pre-pandemic levels tax base and local receipts, which would then allow us to put more capital back in the tax levy, i.e. roads and the $1.5 million capital. I think that the point of this slide is just that, this could start as soon as the effects of the pandemic issues subside. I mean, we don't really know when that's going to be. Certainly seems like this summer is winding up to be a pretty good one. If the hotels and the Airbnbs are any indication, and restaurants are opening and things of that nature. So we could ideally start to see some of this happen back starting in the 2023 budgets. We'll just the town will be closely monitoring the local receipts, using the revenue trend reports that we get on a weekly basis that I'm sure all of you read thoroughly. Kind of a wrap-up sentence. We need to continue to build the town's long-term capital plan and refresh the capital budget outlook. Thoughts?
Right on?
Robert?
Yeah, could we add that the 1.5 million, we'd like to see that capital increase by 2.5% per year? It's one of the things we mention a lot. Roads grow 2.5% every year, but our capital actually goes down every year.
Right. So is that something that the Board of the Selectmen is looking at and is thinking about, or would that just be kind of the Finance Committee's opinion?
I don't know if the selectmen, I know they've talked about it. I don't know if they support it or not, but I know the capital budget has asked for years that actually trend up like the roads and increases at 2.5%. And we haven't been able to get that done. If the board doesn't agree, I understand.
Well, no, we can have a discussion about that. I would like to correct a prior statement. Those revenue trend reports are monthly, not weekly.
Still doesn't mean we always read them.
Right. Doesn't give you a reprieve from reading them on a monthly basis than a weekly basis. Does anybody have, I mean, I don't have any issues with that. If that's something that the committee wants to, again, we can't vote on anything or anything of that nature, but it's certainly a talking point. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I guess I just don't know, by sort of saying, committing ourselves to that, are we cutting off our options for other things? And what is the downside? That's what I'm just trying to figure out. I mean, in theory, it sounds great. I'm not sure I understand enough to know what the downside is potentially.
Yeah, I think that's valuable points. I mean, I don't want to get stuck in a situation where they then say, well, explain and expand upon that further.
Well, I think didn't we say this earlier, that keeping pace is a problem with expenses? Isn't it the same thing?
It is.
It's kind of a general policy of ours, which is to try to keep pace. And we wouldn't be with the capital budget the way they're doing it.
Right. I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with you 100% as far as, $1.5 million today. If we have the same $1.5 million in capital in 10 years, then obviously you're not buying the same amount of stuff. I mean, it makes sense, Robert.
Bob Rittenauer, do you have any thoughts on this, just as a general goal or kind of policy?
I like stressing, and I think that it is very consistent with the a lot of the statements that I've heard from members of the Board of Selectmen, that we'd like to work to restore the capital spending, at least at a level that we're comfortable with inside the tax levy. That's one clear point, and I think that it needs to be just acknowledged and raised. And then the second point, moving forward, it would be beneficial if we could see capital spending increase commensurate with other spending. If it is level funded year after year over time, the point was made that downgrades the ability to purchase things. So those are two key points. Bam, bam. And I think that, if somebody asks you, what do you mean by refreshing the capital budget outlook? That's what you mean.
So Bob, let me ask you this. So let's say for fiscal year 2023, we get capital back into the $1.5 million back into the levy. Do we have to vote on that every year to keep it in the levy, or is now it's a permanent part of the levy unless we voted to take it out?
Yeah, no, see, the situation is like this, is that all the levy is an amount of money that you can spend. So if you spend it on capital, then it's used for capital. But if you already spend it on making the school go up, now you don't have that amount of money left and you can't spend it on capital. So the idea, I mean, it's a very delicate balance of how do you fund education that's grown up more than 2.5% and take capital, put it back in the tax levy and strangle the tax levy because you're taking every dime you can possibly find and throwing it towards wastewater. I mean, how do you do all that? It's very difficult, but these are the goals.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at, is like, what, when you choose one, what are you choosing not to do?
That's what you're doing. Right now, what we're choosing to do, I mean, is we're choosing to fund education and we're choosing to reserve as much capacity for wastewater as we possibly can. And as a consequence, we've dumped the capital out of the levy. But the good news is we've had an inordinate amount of, a high level of reserves, at least in the short term, to meet that challenge. But, we're going to have to work hard on this because what do you do if you spent all the money under the levy on education and then your free cash doesn't come in as high? Now you don't have capital anywhere. So, these are hard things to do. But I think the key thing is to focus on the goals. We'd like to restore. Restore the spending in the levy, if possible. We'd like to work toward that. And we'd also like to work towards increasing the level of spending. I mean, it may very well be you put $1 million, $1.5 million, or, in the levy, and you could supplement that potentially with some free cash money, as opposed to use all of your free cash on it.
So Robert, we didn't use the exact 2.5%, but is that wording pretty good for you?
Yeah, no worries.
That works good, right? I mean, that's kind of what the goal was. I mean, not putting a dollar or percentage amount. But
No, I just want to acknowledge the fact that cutting a capital repair never saves money. It just defers it and increases your costs at a later time. And that's exactly what we're doing with wastewater. And we proved it there.
At $9 million a year.
Yep.
So Steph, is there further notes on that slide?
No.
Okay, so we didn't make any notes with the other priorities, any small coastal infrastructure, additional wastewater phases. And I think it's because we don't want to, I want to keep this presentation, relatively short and tight, but I think these are just things that obviously we've had discussions about the ME school situation. We have to do something. Coastal infrastructure has been something that has been kicked down the road every budget cycle. And then additional wastewater phases, obviously tie into fully wastewater, but those are the things that the town is going to have to contend with in the coming budget cycles. Not with any specific details as to how to address those, but just allowing or recognizing that we know these are our issues and we will have to start discussing them. Everyone fine with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Next slide, Steph, if you will.
Well, George has his hand raised. Did you?
Oh, I'm sorry, George.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think it's necessary we reserve some time, maybe a full meeting after a town meeting to discuss this issue. I'm a little bit concerned about having fixed numbers, 1.5 million, or growth rates, as Robert suggests, 2.5%. What is the amount we need? And so let's address this issue seriously instead of this sort of arbitrary guess at the amount or arbitrary increase that's necessary.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, the 1.5 million capital is not arbitrary. That's what was always in the levy. So, but I think your point is that we should probably have a broader discussion as to how this impacts our town and what we need to do. But
George, just so you know, a couple years ago, before some of you were on the board, we did ask for a capital analysis and we couldn't get it. Age of roofs, total square footage of the roofs, age of the HVAC systems. You know what I mean? And to come up with a real capital budget, and it never got any progress. So it's a great idea. We tried. We should try again.
I agree.
You know,
That's good.
asphalt, even asphalt measurements, condition of the asphalts. We've got a great road system, but we don't have anything else like that for capital.
so we can definitely do that at a later meeting, perhaps in June.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that there are a number of things that once we get out of meeting weekly, we should take a breath and then kind of come up with a list of things that we as a committee would like to talk about in the long range planning bucket. And maybe, Brian and I can kind of collect ideas from members and come up with like an agenda for the summertime.
Any further thoughts on this slide? So opportunities, and obviously disregard the bottom paragraph. And some of this stuff has already been talked about, the post-COVID rebound. I mean, that's talked about in 2 slides up. We're hoping to have a better understanding of what that looks like for our town. Getting our bond rating to AAA from AA+. And that's kind of a key for any future borrowing costs. We don't know what those costs, those borrowing needs are going to be, but every increase in the rating is a savings that we don't have to pay. So, and that's really all that we're talking about on this slide. And then I plan on wrapping it up, and that's it.
It might be worth making the point that somewhere in there, when you're talking about moving up some of the wastewater projects, that interest rates are actually very, very low right now, historically low. So while we're in the low interest rate period, if there's any major debt, it's, would make sense.
Are you making that in the wastewater slide? Or in the opportunity slide?
I would think in the opportunity, because in the wastewater, we're not intending on taking on long-term debt for that. We've had very low, historically low interest rates for a very, very long time period. And I feel the Board of Selectmen have been hesitant to borrow any amount of money, I think. I don't know if that's going to change.
I agree. And I think that that's something maybe that we should be pushing them on. Because Bob's right. It's not going to get much better than this in terms of borrowing. The cost of construction is going to continue to grow. And there's only so much that you can just do outright as a community and still have the community achieving the goals of growing, to build that revenue.
Well, I think the bottom line is if the rate of return on any project exceeds the borrowing rate, you borrow. And we don't seem to understand that in this town for whatever reason. I don't understand.
I don't know if we want it, Steph. I don't know if we want to include that about borrowing for wastewater, because it seems that that's not the solution that the town's looking towards.
But I would argue that's a political decision, a mistaken political decision.
Oh, I don't disagree with that at all.
It's been made, and it's our role, if we're to advise on finance and we think a mistake is being made, to assert that. We don't have to, make a big deal publicly, but we at least have to get that to the selectmen.
Well,
If-
something, George, something, you gotta talk about, listen, if you're gonna do $150 million project, right? That means you're gonna issue bonds to do that project. You are borrowing. All of the stuff we're talking about is simply how you're gonna pay that debt back. And what they're saying is that they would prefer if you could pay the debt back without going to the property taxes. Now, I'm not even gonna comment on that because that's gonna be a real interesting, project, but you're making a heck of a lot of progress on it. But all I'm saying is that you will not construct your sewer system without borrowing massive amounts of money, period.
Right.
The only
I
question is how you pay it back.
No,
I
I
mis-
understand that, but the only borrowing we're talking about is interest-free loans from the state.
No, not necessarily true. If you could get 100% of that interest-free loan, okay, but it's still borrowing.
We can't borrow interest-free for the design and engineering. So we're borrowing substantial amounts of money using the non-0% loans. And I think, one of the comments about the $1.5 million, is that on average? Because you can also borrow large amounts for certain projects and perhaps, or certain other capital expenditures and maybe not expend the full $1.5 million in any one given year. So you always want some flexibility, but we're definitely going to be doing a lot of borrowing going forward.
So Stephanie, maybe that sentence that you're writing right there, we should be talking about the need to take advantage of historically low interest rates before they start to disappear. And that is why we need to be acting with, a sense of urgency, because these rates won't stay historically low forever. And we've already, the 10-year treasury has gone from 75 basis points to 165 in the last 4 months. That's going to have an impact on the costs of borrowing at the municipal level. And we're already seeing it in the municipal bond market. So that's the important component.
I would also like to add that, part of the plan for the coastal infrastructure looked at a set of borrowing schedules that we put together for the capital budget committee to attack the coastal infrastructure. We never really had a plan from the DNR to actually go forward with any of those projects, but that relied on borrowing as well. So when we have the plans in place to actually do the borrowing, like the DPW garage, and it's fully vetted, we have not resisted, the golf borrowing that we did, we haven't resisted it. But I think a lot of the focus has been on just figuring out how to get wastewater done, given the 2011 vote that said, we were going to put most of that on the property tax owners, and the economy was still pretty poor, and that particular option was rejected. And that's why we've been putting together a way to fund it, albeit not ideal from the growth of a municipality, but that's just, trying to react to the political environment that, and I don't know that we can do that for the subsequent phases. So that's probably going to require a lot of borrowing as well.
But that was the political environment years ago at this point. 15,
This was 2011.
2011.
Yes. And the economy was still rebounding from the Great Recession. I think people on the Cape were still hurting. So it didn't even make it out of town meeting. It was voted down. There was a lot of outreach, possibly not as much, but I think there's more of a realization now that wastewater is important. And the leaders, some of which were on the board at that time, they weren't even voting 100% across the ranks for wastewater at that point in time. So I think, that the dynamic has changed quite a bit. I think, we have more flexibility, I believe, but, obviously inflation has attacked our ability to use the amount of dollars that it would have taken 10 years ago. And as you've all noted, we can't keep going down that road, delaying this project.
Yeah, I just would say I remember that town meeting, and just think it's apples and oranges, because there, in some ways, it was kind of rushed. It wasn't sold to the taxpayers, and I think that you have to kind of get out there with education about what's the problem that you're trying to solve, what's the cost of doing nothing. To a certain extent, in the interim, we've had the wastewater committee kind of doing some of that work, but I think there's more that can be done, as future questions come up before the voters. But I just don't think that that is an accurate necessarily reflection of where the taxpayers are going to be today.
It's a complete different environment now than it was before.
Public-
I have a question too. Is it possible there's a number of different large projects that we're looking at, coastal, wastewater, some other things. Can we lump them all together and just take one big note out at one time?
You really should have, for the bondholders, some idea of what you're going to spend that money on, and some good feeling of how that's going to work. There's also an issue of arbitrage. If you go ahead and take out a note, you're not ready to actually construct something, and you hold on to it for a number of years, waiting for that project to be there. So, that would be nice. I mean, some people have taken out, loans to pay for OPEB, to get that behind them. But, anything's possible. We can look at everything, but let's look at our capital plan and then probably outline a borrowing schedule for when that money is actually needed. And if we can get some of these things done sooner than later, then, perhaps that would be a possibility.
All right, let's wrap this up for this this slide. I think this is looking pretty good. I don't think we need to add too much more to it. Any objections to moving on?
I tweaked that sentence, so just want to flag that what I did.
All right, so this is what we're going to run with. Steph, could you send that back to me? With all the saved notes, that would be great. Let's look at the agenda.
Hey, Brian,
Yes, Robert?
sorry, but under your questions part, I just want you to be prepared that typically we get questions specific to anywhere we had any disagreement with the way the selectmen voted.
Right, so let's, I
That's
think,
because you're going to be in front of them. I just want
Yep.
to give you a heads.
I
You're going to
guess,
see that.
so let's jump to the agenda and talk about the warrant again. I think there was only a couple differences in opinion.
Brian, I looked at it earlier, like besides the wastewater one, we were pretty much aligned.
Yeah,
from what I
that's-
remember.
Yep. I think
Like
we were,
right down to the petitioned articles, it was the same.
yeah, petition articles are the same. The CPA, the committee voted to recommend, but it was not unanimous, and I believe the Board of Selectmen was unanimous on a couple of those. Did anybody else notice any differences?
They may ask you about the veterans vote.
I'm assuming they probably will. They voted unanimously right off the bat. with that.
Exactly. So that's it. That may be the only one. And then I will obviously take the questions regarding the opposite view on the CPA. I have no problem with that.
Yep. That's great.
you.
As I would like you to.
Thank you.
Um, You know, Bob, I think you mentioned, or I think it was, yeah, I think you had said something about the Gold Star. You represented us at the meeting last night and said something about the Gold Star warrant item. Am I correct? Rittenhour?
Yes, I was asked what the finance committee,
Right.
what their rationale was, and I referenced specifically the concerns that were raised regarding the income eligibility portion of that it didn't differentiate. And what one of the selectmen said was that, well, it's a application-driven program, and they felt that if there were people that were affluent, that they wouldn't file an application.
Yeah, I disagree with her point of view 100%. If you think that rich people don't look for ways to save money, you don't ever deal with rich people then, because that's exactly the opposite. I do that on a day-to-day basis, and they will fight over a nickel.
Well, they didn't get to where they were today by giving up nickels.
And that's exactly correct. So I disagree with that 100%. And that's, if we are asked to that, the answer to that is we felt that without putting some sort of income limit to that warrant item, we didn't think it was right to use taxpayer dollars to give a reprieve on real estate taxes to people that don't necessarily deserve it from an income standpoint. Not specifically talking about the loss they suffered, but just from a wealth standpoint. So that I think that's a pretty clear one. Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I wasn't encountered on the vote because I wasn't here at the time, but when I watched it on the recording, I would have voted with Jack. You know, I'm a veteran, and I have a problem with these things if they're not means tested. You know, what essentially we're saying is rich communities can give greater rewards than poor communities can. This is a national issue, and veterans compensation should be done at the national level. I don't see the reason for us attempting to do that, especially if we're not going to means test it.
Right. So that was the gist of what I think the reason why we voted against it. And that wasn't discussed at all at the Board of Selectmen level. So until Bob brought it up. Any other ones that you think might be contentious that I should be prepped for? I don't really think so.
I think, Brian, there were two issues just to be aware of. On Article 16, which was one of the CPC articles, the Board of Selectmen have a concern with the payment to the town of Dennis on the veterans housing. It was $100,000 and then it went down to 20. And the board wanted to put a hold on that. They're going to recommend that one from the floor. They wanted to talk with the CPC to find out why they went from 100,000 to 20,000. They may say something. You voted for it as it was presented on Article 16. So that's just something that might come up. The other one,
Article 6, we voted 5-4 to recommend. I mean 5-0 to recommend.
they voted recommend from the floor on 16. Yeah.
It's the new 15.
Well, on the sheets that we had matched, because I haven't changed them yet, I think, Bob, it still
Right.
is, isn't it 16?
No, it's 15 on the new warrant. 16 is the historic resource projects.
Okay,
15, so yes, so.
yeah, so 15, you're right. Yep.
You know,
D, item D.
right, D.
And that's it, just for your information, that's the difference.
Right, I saw that. So the warrant item that we voted on for D, did it have a dollar amount?
20,000.
So now they've taken that dollar amount out?
They want to
Well,
raise,
what they said was that there had been previous iterations of the warrant which had that amount as $100,000. And then it changed in this the last amount that was presented to the selectmen. What happened was the chairman had a call from Wayne Bergeron from Dennis complaining that why was this changed, et cetera, et cetera. And then Bob Rittenhour,
oh, I get
did
it.
the research and got the answer.
I had a video on it.
So how does that affect our vote? Because we didn't vote on that
Nope,
verbiage.
it doesn't. You voted 20. It just, you had asked, Brian, what do you think is, where do you think there'll be discussion items? That
Okay.
might be a discussion item between them and you. So just so you were prepared.
Well, okay.
I didn't want you to
Brian?
be surprised.
Yes.
I think
Yeah,
Robert had it.
the way I read the discussion was that they were going to try to get that back up to the 100,000, which begs the question, because George, you kind of brought it up a little bit earlier, which is helping affluent scenarios. They pay half the taxes we do. They've got the exact same number of housing units we do as a percentage. And if it was $1 million we were sending to Dennis, would that change your mind? See, I don't care the dollar amount. I just simply care that it's Yarmouth taxpayers' money. And now we've got Dennis, great negotiators, like when we were going to do the wastewater, they required that they get an extra vote because they were going to house it. So they're excellent negotiators. And we're sending money to them, our taxpayers' money. It confuses me because like Dover only has a 1% housing, but their affluence is 3 times what we make. So again, wealthier neighborhood, same housing units, commitment, obviously, like the selectmen and Dennis, somebody cut this. If it was $1 million, would you still vote yes, I guess is the question. Because I don't care if it's $1. But if it was $1 million, I'd definitely be even more against it.
Well, I guess that's my point. So if they do raise it to $100,000, that's not what we voted on. We voted on $20,000.
That's correct.
How do we do that logistically? Do we, we can't re-vote on it now.
Well, your recommendation would be $20,000 because that's what you were presented with.
Okay.
And I think this Board of Selectmen, and Bob can correct me if I'm wrong, they're looking to ask the CPC to change the amount. Now, the CPC may not change it. So then when the motion is made and the CPC makes the motion on all of their articles, they would simply insert 20,000. If the selectmen choose to, I suppose they could ask for an amendment to raise it.
Right.
But,
And if
but your position, I just didn't want you to get surprised to
right,
Tuesday.
right. And I watched that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry
Yeah,
for you.
my point is if they were to ask why we voted on that, my response would be, well, I just voted it as it was presented in the warrant. I mean, that's, I didn't have any other further information. Just like now that it's changed, you changed the warrant after we voted on it. So that's fine. Okay.
The only other one they held, they wanted some more information on the capital budget, which they will get on Tuesday.
So which article was that?
It was 10. What is it now? It's the general capital. No,
So would
keep
that be
going.
9?
No, I guess it still is 10. Okay.
Okay.
They just wanted more information on some of the specific items. So they just put in, they were recommending from the floor. It's different than yours.
Okay.
Those are the only 2 that I'm aware of. And Bob, do you know of any others that I've missed?
No, I think, it was remarkable how lined up everyone was.
Yeah. Always helpful.
All right. So,
And Robert has his hand up again, Mr. Chairman.
oh, thank you, Robert.
Sorry, forgot to put it down.
Okay. Will everybody
He
be?
does as well. Stephanie, did you want to say something?
we can wrap up discussion of the warrant. It's just a side question that I have for Bob and Bob
Okay.
on different topics. So
Well, let's wrap this up. Is everyone planning on attending on Tuesday in the Zoom? You're not obligated to.
Okay.
You're coming? Okay, good.
unfortunately, I have my first softball game. So
Yeah, you have to come. I'm
I mean,
kidding.
if you really need me to, I'll skip my softball game. But
No, way more important.
yeah,
Sarah will be there.
Sarah's like, that's news to me.
No, I can try and make it. Don't worry about it.
I'll
Send
cover
me-
for you, Stephanie.
Uh-oh.
Send me
Bob,
the
Bob,
link.
do you know what time we're slated for yet? And like, if that's gonna probably be like 30 or 45 minutes behind the agenda.
I thought they said between 6 and 11.
Oh, okay, even better.
Send me the link, okay, Bob?
I think Bob had put you first after, there's one liquor hearing, the COVID, and then you.
Okay.
There's a COVID update, so you.
Yeah, I thought we'd get a couple of drinks in first and
Yeah,
I'm all
That's a 6:45 call, people. 6:45.
great.
or earlier, depending, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, 6:30 to be safe.
Come on, Red Sox are winning.
I don't have any new business to speak of. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to discuss?
Yeah, I just have
Yeah,
a somewhat on the under the heading of new business, more just a kind of an update. So I remember, when I worked for Rep Turner, we had the oddest district in that, like, a lot of the towns in our district weren't necessarily at that time, this is 10, 15 years ago, coming to us with, earmark requests. And, I know with Rep Whalen, he has definitely put in a lot of work on behalf of the town when it comes to DHY agreement. But I'm just wondering if we have sort of a wish list in terms of earmarks that we are putting forth to him and or Senator Sear on a regular basis, because you get 100% of what you don't ask for, right? So I'm just looking
Yeah,
at like a
definitely.
consolidated amendment that just came out of the legislature in the housing category, and it's got coastal erosion for, I think, the town of Bourne. And I was just like, I'm just curious what we're doing in terms of our request for our legislative delegation. And if you don't know off the top of your head, that's fine, but I just wanted to kind of, raise the topic.
I don't recall, at least since February, March, and now that anything's been sent. I don't know of any earlier requests that were made to the towns, not to the town's benefit, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Bob
and-
may have some issues.
well, I can just tell you, I had a discussion with Senator Sear just yesterday on that very topic. And, again, I'm still brand new. We're putting together all of the big pieces. What we were talking about primarily was to try to leverage additional assistance on the wastewater piece. But I would say one of there's a couple of chief areas that I really think that the town could leverage that I want to learn more about and work with the capital program and try to consolidate these things. I'm critically concerned about the coastal resources, mindful of the fact that we do have a municipal vulnerability plan that is completely fundable. And there's a number of projects. We also have a number of key projects right now that we're wending our way through. There's some grant funding, some town funding. So I think we're going to be working, very closely with the legislative delegation on all of the departments and the capital program committee to try to tee up some of these projects and to see where the funding is. I know there's a lot of coastal funding right now that we're eligible for. We're not really getting, although we are getting some, and there's a lot of work being done. So I think that's a great point that you raised, and I'd love to work with you more on that and try to make sure that, we do the research and we sort of target where funds are available and where the governor is putting a lot of emphasis, then I think the legislative delegation is almost like in a better position to help leverage those types of funds that, you know, some of them are earmarks, but if you have an earmark toward a program that's funded, then things start to happen a lot faster. But right now, I'm at the point where I'm really opening up just a relationship with the legislative delegation. I'm lucky that I have worked with Senator Sears, been my senator, you know, since he was elected, and I've worked closely with him on many projects. And I can't wait to meet, you know, Tim and Kip and continue that effort. But I think it's a really great point you bring up.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the other thing is just keeping in mind, like, it'd be great, just, I know we've got our capital list, we've kind of got our ongoing things, you know, if we had, you know, one or two things each year that we said, you know, this could be something that we could ask for as, you know, a budget earmark. And this is something that if there's any kind of bond bill, that we would want an earmark for that. And just, you know, keeping it be kind of top of mind, you know, especially because, you know, an earmark, even if it's just a one-time shot in the arm of $50,000, that's $50,000 less that we have to come up with. And, you know, yeah, I'm happy to work with you at any point, Bob. I've been pretty successful at getting earmarks in the past.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. I appreciate that. It's excellent.
And also earmarks are back on the federal level too. So we can always go to Congressman Keating and ask him, so.
Let's talk about upcoming schedule. Pat and I were kind of discussing this earlier prior to the meeting starting. I don't think we'll have a meeting next Wednesday, the day after the Board of Selectmen meeting, unless you really, really want one. So that would be the 5th.
Mm-hmm.
The 12th, we probably don't need one as well. Let me just bring up my calendar, see where that looks going forward. So then
The 19th, Mr. Chairman, for maybe some budget transfers.
right, so we'll tentatively have that as a potential placeholder, but if we don't need one, I don't see why we would need one, why we would have one. And then Stephanie?
Weren't we planning on having, or that we might need to have a meeting right before town meeting, and wouldn't we just lump the transfers in with that?
Possibly, yes.
I
And
mean,
Pat-
on the 22nd, are you saying, Stephanie, on the 22nd?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how much time we're gonna need to have. That's just a thought we could do.
what she's saying is she would rather not meet on the 19th is what I get.
Just for budget transfers, it seems like
I would concur. So unless it's something that is, you know, dire and this, you know, town's going to stop running without us doing that transfer, you know, seems like we can wait a little bit, seeing I've signed transfers that were a month and a half or 2 months after the request. So
It would be before the end of the fiscal year as we're seeing things that need to be adjusted. And I think the 22nd would be just fine, sir.
right. So unless something pops up, I think that's the route we're going to go. And so everyone gets a nice reprieve from Wednesday evenings. I'm sure you can find something else to do.
So we're talking about a 9 a.m. start to annual town meeting on the 22nd. So I should schedule an 8 a.m. meeting of the Finance Committee or an 8:30? Well, what would be your preference?
I would say 8 a.m.
I'm not a morning person, so now I'm like.
I'm yeah,
Thinking
Steph,
that.
I would, yeah.
I make that 7:30 then.
Oh,
I get up at 5, so I'm fine with that.
I'm making
I'm-
lattes on site, okay?
You
I'll be
want,
ready
like,
at 5:30.
Yeah,
Right,
You
so
won't
Jack
be
and
as-
I will be there. We'll see you guys there.
thanks, Steph.
Sorry, Sarah. We could just rather bang it out though, you know?
We could
No. I don't think you're underestimating my like lack of morning activities right here. Like,
Well, I'm willing to rescind my last if it, you know,
If we want to meet on that preceding Wednesday.
No, it makes sense to me to do it all at once. I would just think that we should put a soft hold on the 19th, just in case there's more than budget transfers, like if there's another warrant issue or something like that that we need to address. Like, I think we should soft hold the 19th for that night in case there's something we have to address that's more than just that.
Absolutely, I will. Absolutely, I'll have it on my schedule.
What day is the town election? When will we know the results?
It is the 18th, so the 18th is a Tuesday, correct? And then we will know the next morning, the 19th.
I mean, then theoretically, we could be doing that business the next day, but I don't know if, Ed, you think if it fails for some reason, if we would be able to turn around any kind of recommendations, in a day.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, I think because he has a plan B, I think is
Yeah.
why Ed is saying that so easily.
He's already got.
Have a
the
B,
pieces ready
C,
to
and
go.
D.
Oh, yeah. Don't go to D.
So then,
No,
would we,
no, I don't
so
want
then
to.
would we need to post that 19th date just to be on, and the 22nd date just to be on the safe side?
Certainly.
Doesn't cost anything.
Right, and we
Yeah,
can
You
always
just cancel it.
cancel
So, it's so much easier to do it, done, and then say no, cancel.
Why don't we post both of those dates just to be on the safe
Yeah.
side, and then if we can do it,
Yeah, makes sense.
And well, we'll talk to Brian about what the content of the agenda should be, but fine.
Right, we have almost a month before we have to worry about that. or 3
Right.
weeks, so Plenty of
Sneaks
time.
up on you,
I'm well aware of that, Bob.
as we've
Hello.
seen.
Yes. Well, that's all we have for this evening. It was an hour and a half of pure joy.
Wow.
It was much better than others,
I
so
agree.
let us say that.
I would agree, absolutely.
As
We have-
interesting as this is, I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Jack.
Second,
Thank you. Let's do a roll call. Stephanie,
aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Robert,
Aye.
Jack,
Aye.
George,
aye.
Nate.
Aye.
I'm an I as well. All right, folks.
Thanks.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks to everyone on the town staff for all this work. This has been a lot, and this has been a tough budget year.
You've done a lot of work in a
Yeah.
short period of time.
And thank you to Brian for leading us through this. This has
Yeah.
not been a fun year. I would not have wanted to be in charge this year, so.
He diminishes his leadership, but it's really been very great. I agree.
There's
I
been
agree.
support behind me that's been very great, very helpful, and I'm very grateful. So thank you. All right.
Are we still recording?
Yes.
Yes.
You can turn.
Oh,
Yeah.
hold on. Stop recording. Let me say that.